Chosen one. You were never walking alone through that wilderness. You were being watched, measured, preserved. While the world saw you struggling, heaven saw you storing up something far greater than anyone could see. Obedience, faith, endurance. The treasury of your suffering has not been ignored. And now, the vault of heaven has opened, and your name is on the release scroll. This is Chosen One's sanctuary, where silence turns into summons, and the forgotten are revealed as the funded. If you've ever felt like your journey made no earthly sense, it's because it wasn't meant to. You weren't walking toward a paycheck. You were being prepared for a provision that comes only when the classroom of suffering has been dismissed by divine decree. Scripture makes it clear in Isaiah chapter 45, verse 3. I will give you hidden treasures, riches stored in secret places, so that you may know that I am the Lord who calls you by name. This is not symbolic. This is literal alignment for a literal assignment. You are not just being blessed, you are being backed. And when heaven funds a life, it is never partial. It is full spectrum favor, material, spiritual, prophetic, and positional. What you're about to receive in this message is not a motivational word. It's a prophetic disclosure. The struggle you survived was not meaningless. The lack you endured was not a mistake. There is a reason the warfare intensified around your calling. Because God was not just forming your character, He was preparing the clearance for a supernatural release. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what we're about to uncover is more than breakthrough. It is a full unveiling of why the enemy fought your finances, your relationships, your mind, and why heaven has now issued a divine reversal. The scroll has been read, the name has been called, and the season of invisible endurance has shifted. Now comes the visible overflow, and it begins right here. Let us step in. 1. The treasury of the faithful. Why you were tested with lack. There is a sacred economy in heaven that does not operate on coins or contracts, but on covenant. And for the chosen ones, that covenant has always been tested in the currency of trust. When you walked through seasons of financial drought, emotional famine, or spiritual dryness, it was not because heaven abandoned you. It was because heaven was weighing you. In silence, it was calculating your response to lack. In hunger, it was observing your posture. Would you curse the wilderness or trust the cloud that led you through it? The world measures success by accumulation, but the kingdom measures trust by endurance in lack. When you had nothing to show but your yes, when your obedience bore no visible reward, you were passing the test. God never needed your prosperity to prove your calling. He allowed the stripping so that what remained could not be taken: your faith. This is the ancient pattern of the faithful. Before Joseph wore the robe of Egypt, he wore chains. Before David held the scepter, he held a harp in forgotten fields. And before you carry the weight of kingdom provision, you must first be proven in the realm of unseen trust. If you had been given too much too soon, you might have confused provision with permission. You might have built monuments instead of altars. That is why the test came wrapped in lack, not as punishment, but as precision. Because what God funds, He must first refine. He does not waste oil on untested vessels. But those who remain faithful with empty hands are those He fills first when the vaults of heaven swing open. Some mistook your delay as denial, but heaven knew better. The drought wasn't the end. It was the beginning of divine ownership. You had to learn to walk without applause, to sow without seeing, to worship with weeping. And because you did, the treasury of the faithful now remembers your name, and now that name is being called. 2. The fire was the audit. How endurance unlocks divine backing. You didn't just survive something hard, you were evaluated. Every tear you cried in silence, every prayer you whispered when no one stood beside you, every act of obedience that cost you everything. These were not forgotten moments. They were your audit. And heaven passed the scroll across the throne room, not to punish you, but to verify you. The fire you endured was not arbitrary. It was designed with exactness. A fire not to consume you, but to expose what was not eternal. What was attached to you that could not follow you into destiny. That fire knew. It burned away the false supports. It tore through counterfeit connections. It stripped illusions of control. And it left behind something rarer than gold, unshakable trust. This is why 1 Peter says, "You are being refined like gold, so that your faith, of greater worth than the metal itself, may result in praise, glory, and honor." That faith is not theory. It is weight. It is credibility in the Spirit. When heaven funds a chosen one, it doesn't start with money. It starts with the fire. Because the fire proves what finance cannot. It proves surrender. You never knew what your trial was really doing until now. It wasn't only about surviving. It was about sealing your spiritual creditworthiness. While others collapsed under the same pressure, you remained. Bent, yes. Wounded, yes. But unshaken in your yes. And because of that yes, a new record has been opened over your life. Heaven is not just watching anymore. Heaven is responding. 3. The scroll has been opened. Your name has been found on the list. There is a moment in the realm of heaven when silence breaks, not with thunder, but with the unsealing of a scroll. And for the chosen ones, that moment has come. Your name was not added last minute. It was written long before your first breath, sealed in divine ink, hidden until the time of release. And now, that seal has been broken. Your scroll is being read aloud in the courts of heaven. This is not metaphor. Revelation chapter 5 shows us a scroll so sacred that none could open it until the Lamb of God appeared. That scroll held destinies, judgments, and breakthroughs for those marked by God. And what many don't realize is that your life has followed the same pattern. There were doors that didn't open, not because you weren't worthy, but because your scroll was sealed. There were seasons of delay, not because you lacked preparation, but because your name had not yet been spoken in the realm of fulfillment. But now, the silence has ended, the scroll is open, and your assignment is being activated. When heaven opens a scroll, hell can no longer hold you. What was hidden is being revealed. What was delayed is being delivered. What was opposed is being overruled. You're not entering this new season as a beggar. You're walking in as one approved, by name, by purpose, by divine decree. And from this point forward, your steps are no longer random. They are scroll-guided. Every connection, every opportunity, every door is drawn by the ink that carries your name in eternity. 4. Funding is not money. It is movement, mantle, and multiplication. You thought God's funding would come wrapped in cash or contracts. But what He's pouring out over the chosen ones is deeper, holier, weightier. When heaven funds you, it is not a transaction. It is a transfer. It is movement where there was stagnation. It is mantle where there was mourning. It is multiplication where there was barely enough to survive. This is what few understand. Divine funding is not just provision, it is permission. It is heaven's way of saying, go. When Elijah was fed by ravens and then by a widow's last meal, he wasn't just receiving food. He was being sustained for movement, empowered to declare the word of the Lord in a time of national drought. And when Jesus multiplied loaves and fishes, he wasn't performing a party trick. He was demonstrating that heaven funds whatever it sends. Chosen one. When God funds you, it means the blueprint of your calling is being resourced at every level. Not just financially, but relationally, strategically, spiritually. That's why connections are forming that you didn't ask for. That's why inspiration is flowing again. That's why what once felt blocked now feels fluid. The flow is a sign, not of wealth for its own sake, but of alignment with divine timing. You are not being funded to sit. You are being resourced to build, to speak, to release. This is not about accumulation. It is about acceleration. And when God funds your life, no man can explain how it came, only that it came swiftly, completely, and unmistakably. 5. You survived because you were a carrier of kingdom wealth. Chosen one, the enemy did not fight you because of where you were. He fought you because of what you carried. What you thought was weakness, your silence, your compassion, your unshakable faith in the dark, was actually divine currency. You were not just walking through storms. You were transporting kingdom inheritance. And heaven surrounded you, not because you were fragile, but because you were a carrier of something too holy to be dropped. This is why your journey has felt heavier than most. Why others seem to skip ahead while you were slowed down by unseen weight. Because gold, when transported in the natural world, requires greater protection. And so it is in the spirit. You carried blueprints for blessing, oil for nations, wisdom forged in secret. What felt like loneliness was heaven's security detail around divine inventory. 2 Corinthians chapter 4 calls us jars of clay, holding treasures inside. The fragile outer life conceals an inner weight that hell cannot quantify. That is what made you a target. You weren't just surviving trials, you were preserving treasure. And every tear, every prayer, every act of integrity under pressure has added to the vault inside your spirit. Hell knew what you carried before you did. That's why the attacks came early, came personal, came relentless, but none of them prevailed. Because even when your soul staggered, heaven stood. Even when you questioned your worth, the scroll still bore your name. And now, the seal has been broken, the vault is opening, and what you carried in silence is about to speak louder than 1,000 sermons. 6. Enemies scattered. Because the ledger was cleared. There is a moment in every chosen life where justice is no longer delayed, and that moment has arrived. You wondered why the enemy's voice suddenly fell silent, why those who opposed you seemed to have lost interest, why doors that once slammed shut now creak open. It's not a coincidence. It's a spiritual transaction. The ledger has been reviewed, and heaven has ruled in your favor. You see, the warfare wasn't random. It was legal. Accusations were brought against your calling. Doubt was leveraged against your past. Condemnation tried to delay your release. But the blood of Jesus speaks louder than every charge. And now, the courtroom of heaven has issued the decree: debt forgiven, scroll unlocked, mission funded. In Zechariah chapter 3, the high priest Joshua stood before the angel of the Lord, clothed in filthy garments while Satan accused him. But God did not rebuke Joshua. He rebuked the accuser. And that same rebuke has been issued on your behalf. The garments of shame have been removed. The accusation has lost its voice, and the authority once resisted is now reinstated. Do not return to the courtroom when your case has already been closed. Do not pick up guilt that no longer belongs to you. What has been cleared cannot be condemned again. The enemies that once taunted you will not return, not because they had a change of heart, but because heaven stripped them of jurisdiction. What once held you no longer has the right. What once bound you can no longer touch what has been sealed in divine approval. Now walk forward, not looking over your shoulder, but with your head lifted high. For the debt is settled, the slate is clean, and the vault of your future is already swinging open. 7. The season of invisible manna is ending. Now comes public provision. There was a time when you survived on quiet miracles, hidden help, daily grace that no one saw. That was your manna season. It was holy, but it was also humbling. You saw just enough to stay alive, just enough to believe, but never more than enough to feel secure. And even though it sustained you, there was a longing inside. God, when will this wilderness end? Chosen one, that season has expired. Manna was never meant to last forever. It was a temporary provision for a mobile people. But you are not wandering anymore. You are being planted. And with planting comes harvest. Public, visible, undeniable. What once trickled in secret will now flow in the open. No more scraping, no more stretching. You are stepping into sustained supply. The Israelites ate manna in the wilderness, but the moment they crossed into the land of promise, it stopped. Not as punishment, but as promotion. Because now, they would eat from vineyards they didn't plant and live in houses they didn't build. That's what's being unlocked over your life. God is shifting you from preservation to possession. And this shift will not be silent. People will see it. The ones who knew your struggle will witness your provision. The voices that mocked your obedience will be silenced by the fruit it produces. What was once whispered in prayer will now be shouted through evidence. You won't need to explain yourself. The overflow will speak. But hear this: public provision is not given to those who chase platforms. It's given to those who stewarded the private presence. And you did. You prayed when it hurt. You praised when it didn't make sense. You gave when you barely had enough. And now, heaven has authorized the transition. The invisible manna is no longer falling, because your field is about to bear fruit. 8. Your voice will now carry currency in the spirit. You may not have a title. You may not hold a microphone. But chosen one, your voice has weight. And in this season of release, that voice is being funded with authority. When you speak, heaven will echo. When you declare, the spirit realm will respond. Because your words are no longer echoes of hope. They are weapons of decree. Authority is not given to the loud. It is given to the faithful. And heaven has watched you speak life when you were surrounded by death. You declared peace in the face of chaos. You spoke God's promises while drowning in unanswered prayers. And that consistency has built a weight into your voice that cannot be ignored. This is the spiritual currency of the chosen. You don't need influence to make impact. You carry impact, and heaven will give you influence. It may come through platforms. It may come through divine appointments, but it will always come through your sound. A sound born in fire and refined in truth. Remember Elijah. One word from his mouth shifted the heavens and shut down rain. And yet, he was not known for his volume. He was known for his alignment. That is your portion now. What you release will carry more than emotion. It will carry evidence, because your voice is now backed by heaven's treasury. Be careful what you speak in this season. You have authority. Use it with fear of God, because the currency of your words is no longer symbolic. It is legislative. When you speak, doors will open. Chains will fall. Enemies will flee, because God has placed his signature on your sound, and the vault of heaven responds to the voice of one who has been verified. 9. God is funding you because he trusts your motive. Not everyone who asks for blessing is trusted with it. Not everyone who prays for breakthrough is prepared to carry what comes with it. But you, chosen one, you didn't ask for the spotlight. You asked for alignment. You didn't chase platforms. You chased purity, and heaven took note. Divine funding is not just about who's gifted. It's about who can be trusted. That is why others may have had the charisma, but not the release. Why others may have been louder, but lacked the oil. Because God searches the heart, not the hype. And what he found in you was a motive that bent low in worship when no one was watching. Solomon didn't ask for riches. He asked for wisdom, and that prayer revealed his heart. So God poured wealth upon him, not as a reward, but as a sign of trust. The same principle applies now. You didn't ask for glory. You asked for guidance. And because of that, heaven is answering with supply. Your motive protected your mantle. When you had the chance to promote yourself, you chose to wait. When doors opened that weren't aligned with your spirit, you walked away. That kind of restraint is rare, and it is that restraint that now authorizes release. Heaven knows what you will do with the blessing. You will pour it back, multiply it, steward it for kingdom impact. Be warned, if your motive shifts, so will the flow. Not because God withholds from vengeance, but because he protects what is holy. The stream follows alignment. That's why your posture matters more than your plan. The ones God funds are the ones who will feed others with it. So walk carefully in this season, not with fear, but with reverence. You have been entrusted, not just to receive, but to distribute, to equip, to bless. God is not funding your ego. He is fueling your obedience. 10. The warning. Do not miss your moment of funding activation. There is always a moment, a threshold, when heaven opens the vault, but not everyone steps in. Some are too busy doubting, others are too distracted, and still, others simply delay. But chosen one, this is not a season to hesitate. What is being released now is time sensitive, alignment sensitive, faith sensitive. Hebrews chapter 4 reminds us, today, if you hear his voice, do not harden your hearts. That warning still echoes, because when heaven speaks funding over your life, it does not mean the flow is automatic. It means the invitation is active. If you ignore it, you risk watching others walk through doors that were first offered to you. There are people assigned to help you, but they will not wait forever. There are ideas heaven gave you, but they will expire if not stewarded. There are moments of favor when your name is on the wind. And if you are silent, someone else may speak in your place. This is not a threat. It is a call to urgency. God does not coerce, but he does commission. And if you have been crying out for provision, understand this. The answer may already be present, but the activation comes through action, through faith, through immediate obedience. Do not let fear delay your deployment. Do not let old wounds silence your voice. What you've been asking for is standing at the door, but you must move. You must say yes. You must step in, while the vault is still open, and that door is open now. 11. This is the fulfillment of the pattern, from obscurity to overflow. There is a divine pattern that repeats across every generation of the chosen. First comes obscurity, then comes obedience, and finally, overflow. You have lived through the hidden years, the silent wilderness, the long seasons of invisible faithfulness. And now, the pattern is reaching its fulfillment in you. You weren't skipped, you were sequenced. Others may have run ahead with speed, but you are being set apart with precision. God never rushes what He intends to establish. And when the appointed time comes, the shift from obscurity to overflow is sudden, but never accidental. Joseph was hidden in prison for years, seemingly forgotten. But in one moment, Pharaoh called for him, and what had been confined in shadows was brought into the highest court in the land. Esther was an orphan for years, unknown and unseen. But when the time came, the crown was placed on her head in front of the very system that once ignored her. Chosen one, the silence wasn't a rejection. It was a signature. God does not make public what He has not yet completed in private. And you, yes, you, have been formed in fire, shaped in silence, prepared in shadows. But now the scroll has turned, and the fulfillment is visible. What once looked like delay was actually distinction. What seemed like denial was divine choreography. And now that you've reached the moment of convergence, you will see the pattern play out to its end. Overflow, not just for your needs, but for your calling. You are not just being blessed. You are being entrusted to carry blessing into places where famine once ruled. And those who saw you at your lowest will bear witness to your rising, not for vanity, but for validation that the God of patterns has done it again. 12. The assignment behind the overflow. You are funded to build. Overflow is never the destination. It is the fuel. The chosen ones are not crowned to be comfortable. They are funded to build. And what you are receiving now is not just for survival. It is for construction. God is placing tools in your hand, blueprints in your spirit, favor around your name, because the time has come to build what only you can birth. Isaiah chapter 61 gives the assignment clearly. They will rebuild the ancient ruins, restore the places long devastated, and renew the ruined cities that have been devastated for generations. That is the mission of the funded. To restore what has been lost, to heal what has been broken, to create what never existed before. You are being resourced not to reflect wealth, but to reflect heaven. You are to build shelters of mercy, bridges of truth, wells of wisdom. And God is funding it all because your heart said yes when it cost you everything. That yes now returns with power, backing, and supply. Do not waste this season. Overflow without obedience becomes indulgence. But overflow in the hands of the faithful becomes kingdom expansion. Every dollar, every open door, every connection must serve the blueprint. You are not just being lifted, you are being launched. And what you build in this season will outlast you. This is legacy. This is impact. This is heaven trusting you with material resources because you have already proven yourself with spiritual ones. So rise, chosen one. The foundation has been cleared. The scroll has been opened. And heaven has declared, build what I gave you in the dark. There is a sacred weight to being chosen, not because it makes you more important, but because it makes you more accountable. When God places His seal upon your life, He does not simply call you out, He calls you forward. And with that calling comes the invitation to carry light into places still covered in shadow. Funding in the realm of the Spirit is not about luxury. It is about legacy. It is heaven's way of saying, I trust you to carry this further than your pain, deeper than your past, and louder than your fears. To be funded is to be released into motion. And to be chosen is to be watched by heaven even when the earth forgets your name. So what will you do with the overflow? That is the holy tension you now hold. Will it feed your ego or fuel your obedience? Will it build walls or establish altars? Heaven has placed tools in your hand, but the blueprint still unfolds one faithful step at a time. And the world may never understand why you were the one chosen. But heaven knows, because your heart was steady in obscurity, because your yes remained when everything else was stripped away. You are no longer waiting to be verified. You have been approved, funded, and sent. The scroll is open, your name is spoken, and your assignment is alive. If this word confirmed what your spirit has already known in secret, we invite you to take a bold step. Like this message, share it with someone who may be living under the weight of delay, not realizing their vault is about to open. And subscribe to Chosen One Sanctuary, where we speak not to the crowd, but to the called. Drop your insights, your questions, or the line that stirred your spirit most in the comments below. This is more than a video. It's a gathering place for the remnant, for those chosen not just to receive, but to release. Your voice matters, and your journey is just beginning.